All right, everybody, look at this stupidly populated wheel. Let's spin it and find out what we're reviewing right now. It's too many games. This ain't even all my vintage games. This is just as many as I was willing to put on a wheel. Ooh, Vindicators. All right. Let's find out all about it. So, Vindicators for the NES is a fun little tank game. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for tank games because I grew up in the 1980s when everything that we had was pressuring us all to join the military. You know, during Reagan's military buildup times. And the Cold War, the ongoing Cold War, let us not forget. And so, yeah, if you go back now and watch, like, G.I. Joe, which I loved as a child, there's a lot of, like, pro-military business, but I have always loved tanks. Like, even though I look back at the thinly veiled propaganda of my youth, and I'm like, boy, how did I not see through the thin veil of this propaganda? Because kids are not skilled at critical viewership, which explains a lot of children's programming. Anyway, regardless. But I've always loved tank games, and this is an interesting and fun little one for the NES. Now, Vindicators comes to us by Tengen, and if you, or Tengen, I don't know how you pronounce it, I've always said Tengen, but that's just me personally, I could be wrong. Anyway, it's one of those things I've seen spelled but not pronounced as many times as I've seen it spelled. But they were the manufacturers of some licensed and indeed unlicensed NES games. And if you know about the history of the NES, like, so yeah, one of the things that made Nintendo better than a lot of its predecessors, though I have a lot of love for Atari, and you'll never catch me saying ill of Atari. I'm an Atari fanboy and an Atari apologist, all wrapped into one. But, like, there is no denying that Nintendo did something that Atari did not, and that is they said no to some bad games. Or at the very least, they put a system in place by which, people would develop good games. And how they did that is through their licensing. The old Nintendo seal of approval and whatnot. The licensed games were what they were after, and they didn't want people making unlicensed games. But of course people did, but it took some technological know-how, because the NES was the first console, to my knowledge, there may have been another, it was the first console to my knowledge that had a lockout chip, where it would lock you out if you didn't have an officially licensed cartridge that was not sending the correct signal to the lockout chip to say, I'm official, don't worry about me. Anyway, the fun thing, and there are some fantastic histories of this on YouTube that you should totally look up. I will not do one for you here. But there are a number of ways by which the unlicensed games made their way through. I have a variety of those. Some of them have switches on the back to find the right mode to bypass the chip correctly, where if you turn it on and the game doesn't play, you turn it back off, flip the switch, and then it should work. And I've never actually had any trouble with that. It's actually a pretty good system. And there are different other ways that various manufacturers got around it. I don't remember how Tengen did it, but the funny thing about Tengen is that they had licenses. They got licenses, but Nintendo was only giving people like one license per year, unless you were one of their, buddy developers. or one of the developers that is so buddy, like HAL, for example, is so close to Nintendo, they might as well be the same thing. Anyway, they would get more than the one license game per year. And so if you're a company like Tengen, that means that you really have to put all of your eggs in one basket. And so a lot of those studios, that's how you got such great games on the NES, is because people were like, well, we get one shot this year to make all of our money on this NES game. So like, let's make it count. And so that's how you got a higher quality of game. There was no chase the chuck wagon type of nonsense on the NES, because they made sure they were like, we're not doing anything ridiculous like some of the things you saw on the Atari, which, yes, some of those games are excellent and amazing and groundbreaking and essential, and others of them are significantly less so. In order to get that quality, Nintendo said, yes, you have to license. Anyway, I'm waxing rhapsodic about this entire thing while you are watching actual footage of the game I'm allegedly talking about. Tengen had unlicensed games. They had some games that they had in both licensed and unlicensed versions, so you could find the black cartridge with the little slanted top, which is a telltale Tengen sign. They always had like a goldish label. Yeah, for some people, that is the version that you want, is the unlicensed one. There's also the gray ones, which, you know, look just like a regular NES cart because they were licensed. And so that's RBI Baseball, that's Gauntlet, that's Pac-Man. They had both licensed and unlicensed variants. The fun one was the one they got sued for, which is Tetris, which they called Tetris the Soviet Mind Game. Yeah, remember Cold War like I was talking about? That was 1989. They had some good games. Super Sprint, Rolling Thunder, better as an arcade game, arguably. Afterburner, Alien Syndrome, Shinobi, Fantasy Zone. Oh, not related to the version released by Sunsoft. I'm probably thinking of the Sunsoft version. Anyway, Ms. Pac-Man, Skull and Crossbones, the other two RBI Baseball games. Actually, the other two RBI Baseball games are worse than the first one, so maybe not them. Anyway, regardless, Vindicators is one of several games. A lot of them arcade ports that Tengen put out for the NES as unlicensed games. And so that were only ever released as unlicensed games. So if you find a copy, it's going to be the black slanted top cartridge with the gold label. But anyway, it's always exciting to have an unlicensed NES game. It still feels like cheating all these years later. Anyway, now that we're 8 minutes in, why not mention the game or anything about it? Yeah, we're definitely going to have to index this video for sure. So, Vindicators is really fun. You know, it has, believe it or not, almost what we would think of now as roguelite-ish elements, in that, you know, you collect these stars as you're driving around the map. Some are dropped by enemies when you kill them, and others are just lying on the ground. But you have to be smart about how you use your fuel. It is a very precious resource, because when your tank runs out of fuel, you just explode. Which is not what happens in real life. What happens in real life is that you get out of the tank, run for the hills, and the Ukrainians take it and add it to their stockpile of Soviet tanks. Is that war still happening? Just kidding. I know it's still happening. Putin, what the crap? Like, you're not gonna win, you idiot. Like, anyway. You know who's the real idiot was me, predicting that Putin was not stupid enough to get himself involved in this. Hopefully it will still result in his ouster. Anyway, moving on. So basically, on your D-pad, your up and down buttons control the forward and back motion, and your left and right will turn the tank. And so it does take a little bit of getting used to figure out how to quickly and effectively move the tank around. But you do get the hang of it. It is something that's not too incredibly hard. And then once you do, you need to be thinking about not just how do I avoid my enemies and how do I shoot them, but how do I preserve my precious fuel. Now, the how do I shoot them and stay out of their way gets easier as you upgrade your tank in between levels. Now, you are allowed 3 continues before you get a game over, which I do at the end of this footage. But yes, it is a thing that happens, unfortunately. But you get 3 continues, and in between those, like not just the continues, but when you successfully pass the level, if you collected stars, they let you spend them on upgrades for your tank, which are very, very noticeable. You know, sometimes in a game, like I'm thinking things like RC Pro-Am and stuff like that, like sometimes you would upgrade your car and then you wouldn't see an immediate difference. It wouldn't make as much of a difference as you wanted. In Vindicators, it does, like shot distance, shot power, tank speed, shields, etc., etc. Like all of the things that you can upgrade do have a very immediate and very impressive impact on your ability to do things in game. And so you have to make decisions about how you're going to spend your stars, which then impacts how you approach the next level. And so there is some interesting strategy to it. It's not insanely difficult. Like, I did die in the first boss battle, which is unfortunate because I also, had used my continues by then. But even though I didn't make it as far as I would have liked, the game itself is not too incredibly difficult, and it doesn't feel too incredibly difficult. Also, it looks a little wonky in places, like when your tank turns on the diagonal. It's not incredible looking, and some of the things, the rotating turrets, etc., are a little more simplistic in their graphics than some of the other, than the sort of thing that you would expect from a fully licensed game, shall we say. So it's not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, and it's not the most taxing NES hard type game. It's not the most challenging game that you're going to play, but it is fun. It is fun. It does a good job of immediately letting you know, like, okay, this is what the game is. Here's how it goes. This is what's happening. And so really, normally when I pick a game, here's a little behind the curtain peek that you don't need, but whatever, I'll give it to you. So when I do these game reviews, before I capture footage, I like to play the game a little bit so that my footage isn't terrible, so that I'm not just dying a whole lot and that's your footage. I like to, give you a half decent sense for what the game actually is, and what it looks like when a half competent person is playing it. So yeah, I literally, I just played one level and I was like, okay, I get it. And then I just restarted the game and, hit start on my recorder. That's it. That's the footage that you're watching, is me having played it very little going in. Now, granted, I have played this before. I am reviewing, I'm not going to go on and review all the NES games that I don't own until I'm done reviewing the ones that I do own. So I do own the black slant top Tengen unlicensed version of this game, and I'm very happy to have it. And I'll just say that, like, I have played it before, and I, even though I'm not, like, super incredibly amazing, this is one of the fun, like, one of the really good vehicle combat games on the NES. You know, you're thinking about things like Jackal, another really interesting, Jackal's probably a step above this. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's a little smoother, looks a little nicer, but even so, I love the upgradability and the difference that the upgrades make in this game. It's just a fun little wrinkle that sort of, presages some of the things that are popular now in gaming. So yeah, I had a really fun time revisiting this one, and I really like it. So let's give it a final score and see exactly how much I like it. Okay, so final score-wise, we are going a 7.5 out of a possible 10 Cheat Commandos figures. Yes, Cheat Commandos, this is Firebert. He's very important to the team. Anyway, yeah, when they go take on Blue Laser, you know about this. Actually, if you do know about this, congratulations on having internet in 2002. I also had internet in 2002. Let's be friends. Anyway, but yeah, the reason I chose Cheat Commandos is because I started thinking about the shameless merchandising of the 1980s that was associated, because I was going to put G.I. Joes, and then I thought about Cheat Commandos and how much I enjoyed that spoof, and then there you go. That's how we get to where we are. Anyway. So Vindicators, it's a fun little game. It is. It really is. It's one of the true hidden gems of the NES library. Don't feel like it gets enough love, but it is fun. It's fun to play. And so I recommend it if you've not played it yet. Anyway, that will do it for this one, people. I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.